The first time I saw him, he was crawling through melting snow, his tiny hands red and raw. It was late spring, but up here in the mountains of northern Georgia, patches of snow still clung to the ground like dying memories. I remember the way his skin looked, almost gray. No jacket, no shoes, just a torn, dirty shirt barely covering his back. I had hiked out farther than usual that morning. Something had felt off. The air was too still, too quiet. Then I saw movement near the base of a pine. I thought it was a cub at first, maybe a wounded raccoon. But when he lifted his head, I froze. A boy, a real, living child. He looked about 6 years old, gaunt, hair tangled with pine needles and dirt. His eyes didn't widen in fear when he saw me. They didn't do anything. He just stared. Hey, I dropped to my knees, inching closer. Are you okay? Are you alone? No answer. Not a flinch. I reached out slow. He didn't recoil. But when I tried to lift him, he let out a low, guttural noise, like a warning. It didn't sound human. It sounded practiced, instinctive. That's when I saw the tracks. Large, deliberate paw prints. Still fresh. My heart climbed into my throat. Bear. I looked around, scanning the trees. But nothing moved. I had no weapon, just a walking stick and a flare. I knew I couldn't outrun a bear, not with a kid in my arms. Still, I couldn't just leave him there. He crawled a little toward me. Slowly, deliberately. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw something in the shadows. A shape. Broad. Silent. Out from behind a cluster of trees stepped a massive brown bear. My breath left me. It stood there, still as stone, staring at us. Not growling. Not moving. The boy looked at the bear, then at me, then crawled closer to it. I thought this was it. I was about to witness something unspeakable. But the bear didn't move. Didn't bare teeth. It just watched. Then, without a sound, it turned and lumbered back into the woods. I couldn't move for at least a minute. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my ears. But the boy, he was calm. Like this wasn't new. I picked him up. He didn't fight. Didn't cry. Just rested his head against my chest like he had done it before. And as I carried him back toward my cabin, he whispered something. Just one sentence. He covered me. I stopped walking. What did you say? The boy raised one arm, sluggish and shaky, opened his small hand, made the shape of something wide and round. A paw, he said. I didn't know what to say. I just kept walking. Each step felt heavier. Something about this kid, something about the way he moved, the way he looked at me. It didn't feel like I'd just rescued a lost boy. It felt like I was interrupting something ancient, something I shouldn't have seen. Back at the cabin, I wrapped him in a blanket, gave him soup. He barely touched it, kept staring at the door, listening. That night, I didn't sleep, and neither did he. The boy didn't speak again that night. He curled up on the floor like a dog, back against the stone hearth, eyes half closed but never really sleeping. I sat in the chair beside him, too wired to rest, staring at the glow of the dying fire. Every time the wind howled outside, he flinched, but not in fear, more like recognition. The next morning, I called in a favor. My old friend Dean was a field biologist, worked with the state's wildlife department, mostly on wolves and cougars. He owed me a weekend from last year's wildfire rescue. I told him I found something weird, something I didn't know how to explain. Dean showed up just before noon. The boy didn't react much, just tracked him with his eyes. Dean crouched near him and didn't say anything at first, just observed. What's his name? Dean finally asked. I don't know. He hasn't said anything since yesterday, except one thing. He said someone covered him and made a paw gesture. Dean raised an eyebrow. Covered him. I nodded. There were bear tracks. Big ones. Real fresh. Dean examined the boy's arms and legs, then gently pulled up his shirt. He didn't even resist. Holy hell, Dean muttered. There were small scars. Dozens of them. Bite marks, but healed. Not deep. Not angry. These are canine, Dean said. Wolf, maybe, but not from an attack. More like nips. Pack behavior. Discipline. Grooming. Maybe even feeding. Feeding? Dean nodded slowly. I've seen it once in captivity. An abandoned pup accepted by a surrogate female. She chewed meat for it, regurgitated. It's rare. Wild wolves don't usually do that outside their own bloodline. I looked at the boy. He had picked up a stick from the fireplace basket and was slowly chewing it. Dean sat back. Mike, you realize what this might mean? I have no idea what this means. Dean glanced toward the window. If what you're thinking is even half right, This kid didn't just survive in the woods. He lived with them. That night, it happened. A siren blared in the distance. Someone down in the valley must have had an accident. Standard volunteer fire response. Nothing unusual, but the boy sat bolt upright. Then, from deep in his chest, he howled. Not a scream, not a cry, a howl. It rose slow and mournful, a perfect mimic of a lone wolf calling into the wild. Dean and I looked at each other. Neither of us moved. Jesus, he whispered. I took a step forward. The boy stopped, turned his head slightly. Hey, I said softly. You're safe here. He didn't answer, just laid back down and curled into himself again. Later, as I sat on the porch with Dean, he said something I haven't stopped thinking about. You know what I think happened? That bear, it didn't hurt him because it knew the pack had already claimed him. It was guarding him, not from danger, from us. I didn't sleep that night either. The next few days blurred together. The boy didn't speak, didn't cry. He followed me around silently. Ate raw meat if I didn't cook it fast enough. Slept on the floor. I tried giving him a name. Tried Logan. He didn't respond. One morning, I stepped out to cut firewood. I looked up and he was gone. Gone like smoke. I found him 3 hours later. A mile out. Kneeling by a stream, surrounded by shadows. Wolves. 3 of them. Not snarling. Not fleeing. Just watching. And him. He was humming. Not a song. A rhythm. A pattern. Like he was talking. They left when I showed up. But they didn't run. Neither did he. The boy didn't adjust. Not really. He walked on the balls of his feet, barely made a sound, and refused to sleep in the bed. Every night he curled up under the table, his back pressed against the leg like it gave him safety. He wouldn't eat with utensils. Wouldn't wear socks. Water terrified him. I ran the shower once, just to test if he'd let me clean him. The sound made him crawl under the counter, his eyes wide, his whole body shaking. He let out this low, shaky growl, like an animal trying not to panic. He didn't speak. Not a word since he covered me. But his eyes said enough. When Dean came back with a child psychologist, the boy backed into the corner and refused to move. He didn't flail or scream. He just stared, like a wolf surrounded. He doesn't see us as people. The psychologist whispered to me that evening. We're intruders. That night, I left a plate of meat on the floor near the fireplace and pretended to go to bed. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the door creak. I slipped out of bed and peeked down the hall. The front door was open. Outside, the air was cold and wet. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the tracks. Bare feet, moving fast. I found him an hour later, deep in the trees. He was kneeling in a clearing, silent. Still, a shape moved beside him. Then another. Eyes reflected the beam of my light. Wolves. 4 of them. I froze. They didn't snarl. Didn't growl. Just stood, watching me. And the boy, he was calm. He turned his head, saw me, then looked back toward the wolves. A 5th one stepped forward. Larger, darker, muzzle graying with age. She patted over to him. He leaned forward, forehead resting against her snout. She licked his cheek. Twice. I lowered the flashlight. The wolves disappeared into the woods one by one, as if I'd been granted permission to see what I wasn't meant to. I stepped closer. He was still kneeling, head low, breathing slow. You okay? I said. He didn't nod, didn't speak. Just stayed there. Eventually, I sat beside him. We didn't move for a long time. When we finally stood up, he grabbed my hand. First time he'd ever done that. We walked back in silence. Back at the cabin, I gave him a towel, then turned to fix something warm. Behind me, I heard a sound I hadn't expected. Crying. Not wailing. Not screaming. Just quiet, steady tears. I turned. He stood there, trembling, his fists clenched, tears cutting trails down the dirt on his cheeks. I knelt in front of him. It's okay, I said. You're safe. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away. That night, he crawled under the table again. But before I turned off the lights, he looked at me. And for the first time, I felt like he saw me, not as a threat, but maybe something else. I didn't want to open the door that morning. I knew who was knocking before I even stood up. 2 county vehicles. For people. Suits, badges, not a single warm look between them. They asked questions, wrote things down, nodded without listening. Then they handed me a form. Emergency custody transfer, one of them said. We'll take it from here. He's not ready, I said. He's not your child, she replied. They took him in a van. No words. He didn't fight, didn't scream. But when they closed the doors, he looked straight at me. Not angry, not scared, just hollow. I stood in my doorway for almost an hour. Dean called twice. I didn't answer. I just kept seeing that look on the boy's face. Like I had let him down. 3 days passed. I didn't sleep. I checked the news. Local forums. Nothing. Then I got the call. Dean's voice was tight. Mike, he's gone. What do you mean gone? Ran off. Climbed the fence at the county center just after dawn. Security footage caught him near Route 7, heading north. North, toward the forest. I grabbed my bag, boots, rifle, and started driving. I parked at the same trailhead I had found him near weeks ago. Same stillness in the trees. Same chill in my chest. I moved fast. The sun was low, light slanting through branches in long golden fingers. Every sound made me flinch. Bird calls, creaking wood. I didn't stop moving. After 4 hours, I found prints. Small, barefoot, pointing uphill. I followed. It was dusk when I reached the hollow. A massive root system twisted out of the ground like the fingers of some sleeping giant. At the base of the oldest pine I'd ever seen, there was a depression, almost like a nest. And there he was, curled into himself, pressed against a gray-furred body. The old alpha. She raised her head when she saw me. Didn't move. Didn't growl. I didn't move either. The boy looked up. His face was smudged with dirt, his lip cracked. But his eyes lit up when he saw me. He didn't say anything, just leaned closer to the wolf. I knelt slowly, keeping my hands low. Hey, I whispered. It's me. You're okay. He reached out and touched the wolf's ear, then pointed at the ground beside him. I sat down. We didn't talk. We didn't move for a long time. The forest breathed around us. Eventually, the wolf rested her head back down. And the boy, he leaned into me. Not quite touching, but close enough to feel. I stayed until the moon was high. Then, gently, I whispered, let's go home. This time he followed. 8 years can go by in the blink of an eye, or stretch out like a lifetime. For me, it was both. He lives in town now. Goes by Caleb. Chose that name himself. He's 17. Taller than me now. Shoulders broad. Hair a little too long. He still doesn't talk much, but he listens. Really listens. And when he does speak, it's measured. Like every word has to pass through something deeper before it leaves his mouth. He never went back to the county system. I fought for guardianship, and I won. Don't ask how. I think the judge saw the same thing I did. That he belonged where he felt safe. He finished school through an alternative program. Volunteers now at the Wildlife Rehab Center just outside town. Works mostly with rescues. Foxes, owls, the occasional injured wolf pup. Animals that don't trust anyone else seem to calm down around him. People don't ask too many questions. Some just think he was raised off-grid. Some believe he was feral. The truth? That's something only a few of us know. And he's never corrected anyone. He never talks about those years in the forest. But one night, not long ago, we were sitting outside, watching the stars. He had just finished bottle feeding a fawn with a broken leg. His hands, so gentle, so calm. Out of nowhere, he said, the bear was first. I didn't say anything, just waited. He was warm. I think I would have died that night if he hadn't laid down beside me. I turned toward him. You remember it? He nodded. I remember his breath. It was heavy, and it didn't scare me. It felt like being near something that wasn't going to hurt me. Just keep me alive. He didn't say anything else after that, but I didn't need more. Sometimes people ask me if it really happened like I tell it. If I made it up. If I exaggerated, let my imagination fill in the blanks. I don't blame them. I've asked myself the same questions. But then I'll catch Caleb in the yard, crouched beside a wounded bird. Or I'll find him in the woods, unmoving, hand outstretched to some wild creature that should have bolted long ago. And I'll remember. This wasn't a myth. This was survival. And trust. And something no textbook could ever teach. One afternoon last month, a woman brought in a young wolf, barely 2 months old, covered in mange and starving. Caleb stayed up with it 3 nights straight. The little thing wouldn't eat, wouldn't rest, snapped at every hand that came close, until Caleb laid down beside it. Said nothing, didn't even try to touch it. He just lay there, still. By morning, the pup had curled up beside him. He never looked prouder. And in that moment, I realized something. I thought I'd saved him, pulled him out of the wild, brought him back to the world. But maybe I didn't rescue him at all. Maybe he was never lost. Maybe he just needed someone to walk beside him until he was ready to return. Because now, when I look at him, steady hands, calm voice, eyes that still carry the forest, I don't see a broken kid who survived the wilderness. I see a man who was raised by it, and somehow made more whole because of it.